Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something that is, I think, one of the most frustrating and just counterintuitive realities of modern life.
Mhm.
It's the paradox of scarcity. This is the phenomenon where people, they seem to increase their spending. They even commit to bigger liabilities precisely when their income is at its lowest.
So when their resources are just stretched to the absolute limit,
Exactly. Why on earth do we spend more when we have less money?
it is the great financial friction point, isn't it? It seems so utterly irrational when you just look at it from the outside.
Totally.
We see this behavior, and our first instinct is to criticize it. We say, oh, that's a failure of willpower, or, they just need to learn how to budget.
Right, the classic stop buying lattes argument.
Exactly. But what we're going to argue today is that this isn't some isolated irrationality. It's actually the result of something much deeper. It's the consequence of a deep-seated cognitive depletion, a psychological load that's caused by chronic scarcity,
Yeah.
and that gets combined with a completely flawed financial roadmap that structurally locks people into this cycle.
A flawed roadmap. I like that phrasing. So our mission today is really to move way beyond that superficial advice, the just budget better stuff.
Way beyond it.
We want to get to the structural why. We want to understand the actual architecture behind this scarcity trap so that we can then chart a clear strategic roadmap for getting out.
And to do that, we're synthesizing two sources that, on the surface, seem like they have very little in common,
Yeah.
but they're actually incredibly complementary.
Okay, so what are we working with?
We're pulling from the, I'd call it, intense, almost militant entrepreneurial philosophy from MJ DeMarco's Fastlane mindset.
Right.
That gives us the financial structure of the trap, and then we're marrying that with the clinical established principles of behavioral economics, specifically the research on the cognitive burden of scarcity.
So one gives us the what and the other gives us the why.
That's a great way to put it. The synthesis gives us the total picture. You have the philosophical flaw in the roadmap, and that's combined with the very real psychological impairment that scarcity causes.
And that's the key here, isn't it? We're going to examine the financial and psychological system that traps people.
Yes.
We need to stop just criticizing the individual choices people are making when they're under this immense duress and start understanding the constraints that are actually defining their environment.
We have to. And to properly situate this paradox, to really get it, we have to first dive into DeMarco's framework. Because the entire cycle we're about to explore, it lives squarely in the territory that he calls the sidewalk.
So we need the lay of the land first.
You need the whole map. If you don't know what the fast lane looks like, you can't really understand why the sidewalk is so dangerous, and vice versa.
Okay, let's unpack that foundational philosophy then, because it sounds like it defines everything that follows, the Fastlane framework. It outlines 3 distinct paths, and they're based on what? Financial strategy, risk tolerance, and this is the big one, control.
Control is everything.
And those paths are the sidewalk, the slow lane, and the fast lane.
That's it.
And for this deep dive, we're really focusing on the sidewalk roadmap because that is where the scarcity paradox is born and I guess where it's nurtured.
It's the breeding ground.
Yeah.
But before we can really analyze the consumption habits of the sidewalker, we absolutely have to address why the conventional wisdom, the path most people follow.
The slow lane.
The slow lane. We have to understand why it's so mathematically flawed and honestly inherently dangerous. Because for a lot of people, it leads them straight to the sidewalk when things go wrong.
And that slow lane advice is everywhere. I mean, it's what we're all taught. Work a hard job, save diligently into your 401k, invest in some index funds.
And just trust compound interest.
Right. Trust that you can retire comfortably 4 decades later. It sounds so responsible on paper. But the fast lane critique is, it's pretty relentless. What makes the slow lane a mathematical prison, as the source calls it?
Okay, so it all boils down to 2 things. Control and time.
Oh, okay.
The entire slow lane strategy relies on variables that are completely outside of your control. You're betting on the performance of the stock market over 40 years.
Which no one can predict.
No one. You're betting on sustained economic stability. You're betting on your own health staying perfect for half a century. But the really fundamental flaw, the one you can't get around, is that you trade your time, your most finite asset, for money.
Time for money.
Your income is capped. It is severely limited by the finite number of hours you can physically work in a week or a year.
So it doesn't matter if you're the best neurosurgeon in the world. You can only do so many operations in a day.
Precisely. Your income potential hits a hard ceiling, and that ceiling is dictated by the clock.
And that's the prison.
That is the mathematical prism. It
Yeah.
restricts your ability to generate wealth severely, doesn't matter how high your hourly wage is. And if you're relying on that finite income to compound, well, you have to wait 30, 40, maybe 50 years.
A lifetime.
It's a lifetime. And that lack of control, that lack of leverage, it means you are always, always vulnerable to external shocks. A recession hits, you lose your job.
And 15 years of diligent savings can just get wiped out.
Instantly. The goal is deferred gratification, which sounds noble, but the risk you're exposed to over such a long time horizon is just, it's enormous.
That makes perfect sense. So trading time for money is not a strategy for acceleration. It's really a strategy built on long-term hope.
That's it.
So the fast lane, then, is the escape plan. It's the strategy for rapid accumulation. How does it redefine wealth creation?
It just completely flips the equation on its head. Traditional thinking says, wealth is your accumulated savings minus your debt.
Simple enough.
The fast lane equation is fundamentally different. It says wealth, net profit, plus asset value.
Okay, net profit plus asset value.
And the key distinction here is that net profit is completely decoupled from your time. It's driven by what DeMarco calls the law of affection.
The law of affection. That sounds a little dense. Let's break that down, because I think scale and magnitude are the concepts that really separate the fast lane from the slow lane.
Absolutely. So the law of affection states that your profit potential is determined by two variables that you can control.
Controllable, that's the key.
That's the key. The first is scale, and the second is magnitude. Scale is simply how many units you sell or how many people you serve. Magnitude is the profit or the value you get from each unit.
So big reach or big impact.
Exactly. The fast lane demands that you prioritize building systems that can exponentially expand your scale, even if the magnitude, the profit per unit, is really low.
Like Google or Amazon. A tiny profit per click or per sale, but the scale is global.
The scale is billions. Now, conversely, you could have really high magnitude but low scale.
Right, like a boutique business that builds, I don't know, custom yachts.
Perfect example. The magnitude on one yacht sale is massive, but the scale is inherently limited. The market is tiny, it's highly customized.
So the real acceleration happens when you can get both.
Or at least one, dramatically. And this model, it demands a controllable system, a business, intellectual property, a software platform.
Sure.
Something that is capable of exponential, nonlinear growth.
So your income is finally detached from the hours you physically work.
That's when you achieve what the source calls controllable unlimited leverage, or CUL.
CUL. It's a great acronym, but what does that actually look like in practice? I mean, how do I control the leverage?
Okay, let's use an example. If you're a consultant, you're in the slow lane, your income is capped by how many hours you can bill.
Right, time for money.
But if you create a piece of software that automates that same consulting process, and then you sell that software as a subscription to 1 million users for, say, $5 a month,
You've achieved CUL.
you've got it. You control the pricing. That's magnitude. You control the distribution. That's scale. And your income continues to come in Tuna 47 without requiring your active hour-for-hour labor. That is the fundamental difference in control.
And this reframing, it brings us to the critique of compound interest, which I think is going to shock anyone who's ever read a basic retirement book. The fast lane basically dismisses compound interest as an accelerator. Why?
Because it's a tool for wealth retention, not for wealth creation.
Okay, explain that difference.
The source material is just crystal clear on this. When you're starting out with minimal capital, compound interest is virtually ineffective at changing your trajectory or pulling you out of a scarcity trap.
But we're all taught that 7% is this magic number.
You know. But do the math. 7% of $10,000 is only $700 in a year.
Right.
You can't build a new life. You can't start a system. You can't generate freedom on $700 a year. It's not enough horsepower.
It's the difference between multiplication and addition. If I have close to nothing, multiplying it by 7% is still close to nothing. I need a big number to multiply in the first place.
Precisely. The true profound utility of compound interest is only realized after you've rapidly accumulated a substantial principal through CUL. We're talking $5 million, $10 million or more.
Then the math starts to look very different.
Then 7% gets you $350,000 to $700,000 a year. That's real cash flow. That's freedom. So the fast lane dictates that your time is much better spent building the system to generate that large capital base quickly in 5 to 10 years, rather than waiting 40 years for your small savings to just marginally grow.
That completely reframes the whole purpose of time investment. Let's delineate these roadmaps really clearly for the listener now. Let's summarize the key differences in philosophy, towards time, control, and spending.
Okay. The sidewalk is defined by one thing: immediate consumption.
Get it now.
Their driving desire is instant gratification and status signaling. And they very quickly rack up what's called indentured liability. That's debt that commands your future time. Time is just a commodity to be spent, often before it's even been earned.
Okay, then there's the slow lane. This operates on hopeful accumulation.
Hopeful is the key word.
Time is exchanged for money, which means your income is capped, your leverage is limited. Their core behavior is deferred gratification, which is, it's honorable, but they're still heavily dependent on external factors and those really long time horizons.
And finally, the Fastlane. This operates on controllable unlimited leverage, or CUL.
Right.
Here, time is leveraged. Income is detached from labor hours. Their core behavior is value production, and they are strategically intensely frugal with their time, using it only for high-leverage activities that are designed to rapidly scale up that principal base.
And the scarcity paradox, the whole focus of our deep dive today, is the defining tragedy of the choices made on the sidewalk. Now we get to the real core of the paradox. The sidewalker is defined by this insatiable consumption, spending more when they have less. If you're already struggling, why would you possibly adopt that as your formula? It feels like lighting your own life raft on fire.
It feels that way because it is the absolute antithesis of wealth building. The sidewalker operates exclusively on prioritizing short-term emotional satisfaction over any kind of long-term stability.
It's all about the now.
It's all about the now.
Yeah.
And this devotion to instant gratification, it actively eliminates any possibility of financial freedom. It leaves them perpetually exposed to stress, to crisis. Their financial state is marked by this consistent irresponsibility where spending is always exceeding income.
And they're using credit cards and loans to bridge that gap.
High-interest credit cards, personal loans, anything to just get through the month.
But the question remains, why does the spending seem to increase when that financial fragility gets more intense? I mean, we've all seen it. The people who are in the deepest financial hole often make the most conspicuously extravagant purchases.
Okay, so the primary psychological driver here is status signaling. And it's deeply, deeply connected to social anxiety.
The need to look good.
The need to look okay, to look normal. When you're feeling scarce, the pressure to conform, to maintain the appearance of outward success that society prescribes, it just intensifies exponentially. The gap between your internal reality, I'm broke, and your external projection, I'm fine, it becomes unbearable.
So those expensive purchases, the least luxury car, the $1,000 phone, the designer clothes, they're not actually fulfilling a functional need. They are projecting a facade.
That's exactly what they are. They're status markers. They're used to project the appearance of success to mask that painful private reality of accumulating debt and a total lack of control.
It's a mask.
It's a desperate, very expensive mask designed to fit in. They feel that if they look successful, maybe they'll somehow attract success, or at the very least, they can avoid the humiliation of seeming poor.
And that pursuit of the appearance of wealth is the definition of a vicious trap, isn't it?
It is.
They're using this display to alleviate some temporary emotional pain, but at the same time, they are locking themselves into profound long-term debt.
And the result is this profound psychological and financial imprisonment, all because of the obligations they took on to get that stuff. But it's even more than just status. That status spending, it also functions as a really expensive form of emotional coping, of avoidance.
Avoidance of what?
Of the pain. The temporary high you get from acquiring something new, that little dopamine hit, it provides instant gratification that successfully distracts the individual, maybe for a few hours, maybe a few days, from the chronic, gnawing stress of their actual financial reality.
They're essentially self-medicating with debt.
That is a very, very accurate way to put it. The psychological addiction to spending, it structurally compounds the problem. The pain of the debt is chronic, it's slow, it's always there in the background. But the relief from a new purchase is acute and immediate.
And the brain, especially a brain under stress.
The brain, compromised by scarcity, is going to choose that acute relief every single time.
This brings us to a fascinating concept from the source material, the law of victims. This connects the destructive spending to the sidewalker's fundamental mindset. So this isn't just about financial mistakes, it's a complete relinquishment of personal control.
It is the bedrock of the sidewalk mindset. They adopt the law of victims, they relinquish power, and they blame external circumstances or fate or big corporations for their distress.
So you'll hear things like, the economy's rigged, or I just have bad luck.
Exactly. And the Fastlane framework is mercilessly clear on this point. Personal responsibility and accountability are the absolute prerequisites for control, and therefore they're the prerequisites for wealth generation.
So if they believe their poverty or their scarcity is the result of forces outside their control, then there's no internal incentive to change their own behavior.
Precisely. Why would you? The failure to assume control prevents sidewalkers from seeing their financial condition as the direct consequence of controllable actions and decisions they have made.
They externalize the failure.
They externalize it, which then justifies their consumption habits. Because the logic becomes, well, if the world is screwing me over anyway, then I deserve this new gadget.
And that consumer mindset, that absolute focus on satisfying immediate internal desires, that ensures their failure if they ever even try to transition to the fast lane or even just the slow lane.
That is the critical link between the paradox and the roadmaps. The sidewalker's consumer mindset is inherently a selfish entity, to use the language of the source.
Selfish how?
Whether they're shopping for themselves or, say, trying to launch a business, their focus remains entirely on satisfying internal immediate desires, emotional relief, status, comfort. It's never about creating external value for the marketplace.
But the fast lane insists that wealth generation stems from solving scalable market needs. How does the sidewalker's mindset prevent them from even seeing those needs?
Because they're constantly looking inward. They're always asking, what can I buy? Not what can I build or who can I serve?
So they fail to generate wealth because they don't produce value for others.
And at the same time, they are ruthlessly exploited by the market through consumer debt because their entire focus is on consumption. They become the victim of the very cycle they refuse to acknowledge they control. To truly illustrate the devastating cost of this consumption, we have to adopt the Fastlane's most crucial value metric,
Which is?
the valuation of time. This perspective lets us quantify the true mathematical trap of the paradox.
Okay, let's call it what the sources call it. Time is the king asset.
Time, specifically unobligated, free time, is the most valuable asset in the Fastlane. It's the one resource you absolutely need to build those high-leverage systems we talked about, the CUL systems.
So we need to measure our spending not just in dollars, but in life.
In the ultimate cost of life exchanged. And we have to bring in Thoreau here. He captured this idea centuries ago.
What was the quote?
He said, "The cost of a thing is the amount of what I will call life, which is required to be exchanged for it, immediately or in the long run."
That maxim should be painted above every credit card statement.
It should. It reframes every single impulsive purchase. It's not just the purchase price of, say, a $2,000 television.
It's 5 days of your finite working life you have to
Right.
exchange for it.
Right. And then you amplify that cost with high-interest debt. And that's where we get to the concept of indentured time.
Indentured time.
This is the time thief. It's the direct financial consequence of scarcity spending. When a sidewalker buys something beyond their immediate means, and especially when they finance it with high-interest credit, they exchange their potential free time for indentured time.
So you're pre-selling your future.
You are. That debt converts your discretionary time that could be used for education or starting a side business or just strategic thinking. It converts it into mandatory labor required solely to service the debt obligation.
So let's say I wanted that $10,000 sports watch to feel successful. But because I financed it at a 20% interest, I now have to work an extra 3 weeks this year just to pay the interest, not even the principal.
Yes.
I am literally indentured to the bank for that feeling of status.
You are structurally locked into the necessity of exchanging your time for money, simply to keep up with yesterday's consumption choices. This mechanism actively destroys the very freedom and mental space that wealth is meant to create. It's a guaranteed path right into the slow lane's mathematical prison.
And this focus on debt, it fundamentally dictates what the sidewalker buys. They're systematically funding liabilities, not assets, which is the exact opposite of the fast lane strategy.
It is the defining expenditure error. Fast laners, they deploy their capital strategically toward appreciable, controllable, cash flow generating assets.
Like businesses, intellectual property.
Right, IP, automated systems, real estate that pays them every month. Sidewalkers, by contrast, focus exclusively on acquiring depreciable assets, or just liabilities. Things like brand new, quickly devaluing luxury cars, the newest gadgets, oversized homes they can't afford.
And those purchases drain cash flow immediately and consistently.
Through interest, through maintenance, through depreciation. It's a constant drain.
And this liability focus leads us directly to the core financial engine of the paradox, doesn't it? The negative compounding trap.
Yes.
This isn't just a slow leak. This is the mathematical driver that actively accelerates scarcity.
It is the engine of financial destruction because it weaponizes the very thing that's supposed to help us, compounding, but it turns it against us. When your consumption is financed by high-interest debt, the cost of that depreciating item is mathematically magnified. That $5,000 you spent on a credit card isn't just $5,000.
Over 5 years at, say, 25% interest, it could become.
It could become $12,000.
So you're paying exponentially more for something that is simultaneously losing its value. It's a double loss.
It's a crushing double loss.
Yeah.
The high-interest expense on all your existing stuff rapidly consumes your already limited income. That income is legally and mathematically obligated to the debt before you ever even see it.
Which means you are forced to work just to service the debt, not to improve your position, not to save, not to invest.
That leveraged negative financial position accelerates the debt cycle. It makes you feel more scarce, which then triggers that desperate search for emotional relief through more consumption. And there's the loop right there.
I think that feeling of being perpetually obligated, of having zero flexibility, that is the essence of chronic scarcity. Your money is just a river that flows straight into the hands of the bank before it ever touches your life.
And this chronic condition is often hidden by these really inconsistent financial habits, which highlights something called flawed mental accounting.
Mental accounting.
We see sidewalkers trying to be frugal, but they lack any strategic consistency. They fail at both slow lane frugality, which is being frugal with money, and fast lane frugality, which is being frugal with time.
So you see them clipping coupons, driving across town to save 50 cents on gasoline, feeling really virtuous about that little micro win.
And then they immediately undermine that entire effort by splurging $800 on a status purchase the next week.
Why do they do that?
Because they treat money differently, depending on where it comes from or what it's supposed to be used for. They might treat their grocery budget as scarce money, but a tax refund is fun money.
I see.
This subjective classification, it masks the severity of their overall financial hole and the constant psychological switching between austerity and indulgence. It just keeps them exhausted and confused.
We have established the philosophical error and the mathematical trap. Now we have to turn to the definitive why this paradox exists, and we have to move beyond willpower and into the hard science of brain function. The issue is not a moral failing. It is a cognitive deficit induced by the environment itself.
This is the crucial intersection. Now we're bringing in the clinical findings of economists like Senhil Mullainathan and psychologists like Eldar Shafir.
Okay.
Their research demonstrated pretty conclusively that financial scarcity imposes a measurable, significant cognitive load. When you are poor, the very act of being poor consumes a quantifiable portion of your mental bandwidth.
So the stress of just calculating bills, juggling creditors, making sure you can survive, it isn't just emotionally unpleasant. It is literally depleting your brain's processing power.
Think of your brain's cognitive function like a computer's RAM.
Okay.
When you're managing immediate financial crises, constantly worrying about rent, avoiding debt collector calls, calculating minimum payments, those tasks are running permanently in the background. They're consuming your cognitive load.
Which leaves less capacity for everything else.
Less capacity for efficient functioning, for complex problem solving, and critically, for future planning. Scarcity compromises your executive function just as much as pulling an all-nighter does.
And didn't that research show that the cognitive strain is equivalent to losing something like 13 to 14 IQ points?
It did, which is a profound drop.
It's huge. So what does that kind of cognitive depletion do to your decision quality?
It's devastating. The brain, under that kind of duress, it struggles severely with delayed gratification and long-term planning. You become structurally impaired in your ability to even consider the consequences of an action 6 months down the road.
The future becomes too abstract.
It's too abstract and too taxing to compute. So the brain starts to rely on immediate, tangible, emotional rewards, and that directly fuels the instant consumption cycle. The impulsive status purchase isn't a mistake. It's a desperate psychological short circuit for immediate, necessary relief from a crisis state.
And this sustained high-stress environment, it also triggers some incredibly counterproductive coping mechanisms. The sources highlight something called financial avoidance.
Yes, scarcity anxiety triggers a powerful, powerful urge to avoid the source of the pain.
Which means what?
Which means delaying payments, refusing to open envelopes that you know contain bills, or just ignoring debt notices entirely. Because the bad news is just too stressful to confront when your bandwidth is already maxed out.
And that is absolutely catastrophic behavior in the context of high-interest consumer debt.
Catastrophic. Because the debt doesn't wait for you to feel better.
No.
That avoidance allows the interest and the penalties to compound even faster, which deepens the original condition of scarcity and, in turn, accelerates the need for that emotional consumption fix.
So the individual is trapped in this negative feedback loop. The crisis demands attention, but the stress of the crisis prevents rational attention.
That's it. Let's summarize the trap again,
Yeah.
because this is the definitive moment for the listener.
Go ahead.
Low funds lead to massive stress. That stress compromises your cognitive function. That leads directly to immediate emotional spending. And that spending then mathematically deepens the scarcity.
They are making a psychological choice to cope, which the financial structure then punishes severely, thereby guaranteeing the cycle continues.
It is the self-perpetuating cyclical trap of modern finance. And this high-stress, low-bandwidth environment, it amplifies specific cognitive distortions that drive this irrational spending.
Okay, let's focus on those specific research distortions. First up, mental accounting. We touched on it earlier, but how does the cognitive load of scarcity make it worse?
Mental accounting is the brain's attempt to simplify complexity by subjectively classifying money into different buckets.
Right.
Under high stress, this classification becomes more rigid and less rational. A sidewalker might feel intense shame about not being able to pay their electric bill, that's the necessary money pool, but feel zero guilt about spending $500 on new shoes from the fun status money pool.
Because the cognitive effort required to reconcile those two pools is just too high.
It's too high, so they compartmentalize. They literally feel justified in spending money they don't have on luxuries because they mentally separate it from the debt they already have.
The net result is that the financial hole just keeps getting bigger, regardless of what small savings they might achieve in one of their little compartments.
Exactly. The other key distortion is biased optimism.
Okay.
The irrational belief that I will win the financial game even though I keep losing.
That sounds powerful.
It's a powerful distortion because it allows for massive risk-taking. It's the belief that negative financial events, getting laid off, the inevitable cost of that 25% APR in your credit card, are less likely to affect oneself than they are to affect others.
And this justifies accumulating vast amounts of debt.
It does, because it's based on an unrealistic projection. The thinking is, I know I'm poor now, but my ship is coming in, or I'll definitely get that promotion next quarter.
So the brain is betting on a guaranteed future income that does not yet exist to bail them out of today's liabilities.
Which is the core financial violation of the Fastlane. You must base your liabilities on actual, present, controllable capital, not on hopeful future projections. Biased optimism is a psychological mechanism that enables the sidewalker to take on excessive risk, which is fundamentally incompatible with surviving the mathematical pressures of high-interest debt.
Okay, so let's bring this all back to the Fastlane then. If scarcity is primarily a cognitive burden,
It is.
then the strategic accumulation strategy, aiming for wealth in 10 years or less, is fundamentally about cognitive liberation.
Absolutely. This is the profound non-monetary value of the Fastlane. By rapidly eliminating chronic financial concern through scalable wealth creation, the Fastlaner frees up all of that mental bandwidth.
Right.
And that released cognitive capacity is precisely what is necessary for the complex, high-leverage strategic activities that are required for system creation, for market optimization, for superior long-term decision-making. The goal isn't just financial wealth.
It's mental clarity.
It's mental clarity and intellectual freedom. You cannot build a system that requires massive strategic input if your brain is consumed by calculating your bills every day.
And it's important to recognize that this internal cycle, this psychological and mathematical loop, it isn't operating in a vacuum.
Not at all.
There are external economic and social forces that amplify this trap, that make the scarcity mindset even harder to escape for people who are trying to break free.
We absolutely have to account for societal pressures. As income inequality rises, the distance between the perceived normal lifestyle and the sidewalker's actual reality just increases.
Which intensifies the pressure to keep up.
It intensifies the pressure to maintain the appearance of success, especially in a digital age where status signaling is constant and is visible to everyone.
It's the pressure to buy the expensive gear just to post a photo that makes you look successful, even if that purchase plunges you deeper into debt.
The consumption is driven purely by social comparison. And that leads directly to increased conspicuous consumption spending money to achieve a perceived status that masks your true financial reality.
And the system benefits from that.
The system benefits when you are poor, but trying desperately to look rich. The pressure to keep up deepens that emotional reliance on instant gratification, which, of course, fuels the debt necessary to sustain the illusion of prosperity.
We often talk about lifestyle creep, when spending increases responsibly as your income rises. But the Sidewalker operates on a sort of perverse version of this.
They do. It's debt-funded lifestyle creep.
What's that?
It's aspirational spending that is funded before the income required to support it even exists. It's funded purely through readily available credit.
I see.
The individual attempts a lifestyle upgrade, and that upgrade is immediately absorbed by high-interest debt and the required maintenance costs. This mechanism ensures that any small income increase, a raise, a bonus, a tax refund, is immediately swallowed by debt repayment or even more aspirational spending.
Which prevents the critical step of wealth accumulation.
It prevents it entirely. So they get a $500 raise, and instead of putting it toward debt principal or savings,
They lease a slightly better car or they upgrade their apartment, and now their fixed monthly obligations are $600 higher.
and they are still scarce. Exactly. The reliance on credit and debt guarantees that the scarcity condition persists. It perpetually frustrates the individual and reinforces that victim mindset because they feel like, I'm working harder, but I'm never getting ahead.
And fueling all of this irresponsible behavior, this lack of responsibility, is the illusion of the big hit.
This is the defining characteristic of what I would call hope-based finance. It's the belief that wealth comes from luck or gambling or some single external unpredictable event.
Like winning the lottery.
Hitting the jackpot or inventing a billion-dollar concept overnight without any prior process or work. This is fundamentally incompatible with the Fastlane perspective
Because the Fastlane insists that wealth is the result of disciplined process.
of strategic system building and sustained value creation. If you believe wealth is a lottery ticket, you don't need discipline. You can justify any irresponsible consumption today because, hey, tomorrow I might be a millionaire. It excuses you from the hard, necessary work of value production.
The fundamental error, then, is this conflict between market need and personal consumption need.
The Sidewalker is obsessed with consumption need, that immediate relief, that status, while the Fastlane demands a relentless focus on market need, on solving scalable problems for other people.
So that brings us to the ultimate solution. If we understand the philosophy, the math, and the psychology of the trap, the solution has to be a profound, fundamental reorientation.
It has to be. It's a shift in identity, not just in habits.
And what is that shift?
That definitive step is switching your identity from a consumer to a producer. The scarcity trap is inescapable as long as your focus is inward. The escape requires you to focus your efforts on creating, innovating, or managing scalable systems, building a better contraption that serves the market rather than just being the market's primary purchaser.
And that identity shift, it demands reclaiming full control.
You have to reject the law of victims. You have to embrace full, radical responsibility and accountability for your current financial condition. The Fastlane insists on prioritizing controllable, unlimited leverage, CUL systems you can scale and control to break free from reliance on external factors like your employer's salary cap or limited market returns.
So if the solution requires someone else's permission, it's not the Fastlane.
It's not the Fastlane.
Okay, so let's define the necessary change in behavior. Fastlane expenditure and strategic frugality. Where does the money actually go?
Your capital has to be redirected entirely away from depreciable liabilities and toward cash-flowing appreciable assets. And this is based on relative value.
Relative value.
You only invest in things that help you solve scalable market needs. So if a new computer is a production tool for your system, it's an asset. If it's a new toy for gaming, it's a liability.
And the frugality has to be strategic with time, the king asset.
Absolutely. You must become ruthless in avoiding time thieves. That includes things like parasitic debt, which demands mandatory work, and focusing your time only in high-leverage activities that pay you the dividend of free, unobligated time by detaching your income from your labor hours.
So if an activity doesn't increase your scale or your magnitude or your leverage,
It is consuming precious time that should be spent on CUL creation.
the ultimate objective then is to transcend scarcity, not just cope with it through punitive budgeting.
That's the structural escape. Traditional budgeting and mindful spending, they often fail because they're restrictive and they collapse quickly under the cognitive pressure of scarcity. The Fastlane solution is not to restrict spending. It's to proactively generate such a high magnitude of scalable income that the need for cognitively taxing restrictive budgeting becomes completely irrelevant.
The goal is to eliminate the underlying condition of scarcity itself.
And by doing that, you free up your mental bandwidth to keep scaling even higher. So we have established the unified theory of this paradox. Let's just provide the final synthesis for the listener.
Let's do it.
The reason people spend more money when they have less is that they are operating under a scarcity-induced cognitive deficit.
Right.
That deficit forces reliance on emotional coping mechanisms, like instant gratification and status signaling. This psychological response is then financially amplified by the time debt calculus of high-interest consumer debt, which locks them into mandatory labor.
It's a powerful and deeply circular trap. Now, let's summarize the 3 immediate actionable takeaways based on the Fastlane principles to counter this cycle.
Okay, first, you must immediately halt the acquisition of depreciable assets funded by high-interest debt. Period. Every financial decision has to be filtered through one question.
And that is?
Does this purchase create indentured time, or does it free up time? If it creates indentured time, you must reject it. This is how you deconstruct the time debt calculus.
Okay, what's second?
Second, mandate the producer mindset. Shift your focus from consumption to value creation. Focus all of your strategic effort on building systems and assets for scalable income that function independently of your physical labor hours. Ask yourself, how can I build a contraction that solves a problem for 1 million people?
And third?
And third, reject the victim mindset. Prioritize control and full responsibility over all of your wealth mechanisms. A financial strategy that eliminates your personal control, whether it's reliance on luck or the slow lane's market predictions or the hope of a bailout, is a fundamental violation of the Fastlane code, and it will keep you trapped regardless of your current income level.
That is a profound strategic shift. It's moving from reacting to scarcity to structurally preventing it. Thank you for walking us through this really complex synthesis.
My pleasure. And this brings us to our final provocative thought for you to consider. We've established that the true value of wealth accumulation is cognitive liberation. So if your current job or your current business strategy requires 100% of your mental bandwidth just to manage debt and bills, what complex, high-leverage activity is your brain not able to conceive or execute right now? That lost opportunity, the inability to think strategically, to innovate, and to build a scalable system, that is the real cost of the scarcity paradox.